I'm Lisa. Welcome to my channel. This is my random recipes. Let's have breakfast. Today's recipe is going to be a good one. Today I've been making sourdough waffles. The name of this recipe is Grandma Ardie's sourdough waffles. As promised, I will include a recipe to make your own sourdough starter along with this recipe. So exactly what is a starter? Sourdough starter is a culture containing a stable blend of wild yeast and suitable lactic acid bacteria. It is known as a ferment. The culture is maintained indefinitely, fed with fresh flour and water consistently, also called refreshing. The sourdough starter is used to seed fermentation in new dough when baking bread and is responsible for leavening, making it rise, and flavoring a loaf of sourdough bread, or in our case, waffles. Many types of beverages are ferments. Beer, wine, hard alcohol. A lot of foods are ferments. Most pickles, some cheeses, yogurt, miso, different breads, and then some of them use starters, not all of them. Foods that use a starter are cheeses, again, some yogurts, some types of alcohol, and some breads. It's kind of like how all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs. The waffle recipe is from my mom. However, the sourdough starter recipe is from my Dorothy Dean cookbook. That's this here. Sourdough starter is a living organism. It needs to be fed and tended to at least on a semi-regular basis in order to be kept alive. The starter my mom had, she'd received from her sister. They both had theirs for many years. Eventually, my mom gave me a starter from hers. Think of it as getting a cutting from someone else's plant. I didn't use it often enough, so it died. Then later on, I got a starter from an online professional chef. The starter that he used relied on the yeasts that are naturally present in the air around us in order to create the ferment. It needed to be used on a regular basis or it would die. I tried this one a couple different times and both times it died because I just didn't use it enough. It was designed for people who are baking homemade bread, homemade sourdough bread on a regular basis, and I just don't. The starter I'm going to make only takes a few days to make. The old one I had from this recipe, it died too, but again, I just don't use it often enough. But I didn't feel quite so bad because this one is made over just a few days instead of several weeks. This one uses store-bought yeast, so that's why it's so much quicker. So come along with me over the next few days as I will create a new sourdough starter. And then once the sourdough starter is complete, then I will make the waffles. Okay, so this is day one of putting together the starter. I'm gonna turn the camera down so you can see what I'm doing. This is 1/2 cup of tap water heated in the microwave. It wants to be between 100 and 110. So I'll check the temperature. And we're at 108, so perfect. To that, we are going to add 1 packet, which is equal to 2 1/4 teaspoons yeast, dry active yeast. I'm gonna put that in there in my water, and we're gonna give it a little stir. We wanna give it a chance to activate or bloom. So we'll set that aside for a moment and let it do its job. So I'm gonna make this into the crock for my slow cooker. 2 cups of flour, 1 tablespoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and then this is 1 1/2 teaspoons of cold water. So we're going to combine these and give them a stir. So let's make sure we're getting the flour dissolved into the water. That looks just about right. So I'm gonna check my yeast, just make sure it has had a chance to bloom. You can tell by the smell sometimes. Yeah, there's some foaminess on the top. I don't know if you can see it, but there is separation of the layers. So the top layer is the foaminess, and that's what we want. The yeast and water mixture goes into the flour, and we're going to give it another stir. Just stirring to combine. Now this is going to ferment for 3 or 4 days. I'm going to cover this. Just use the lid. This is going to go into my oven, no heat on, just the light. And it's gonna be there for 3 or 4 days. I'll be checking back in on it each day to give it a stir, make sure it's starting to activate. And once it's done, then we'll be moving on to doing our waffles. My oven behind me, I don't know if you can tell, but I have the light on. It's gonna stay on for the next 3 or 4 days. We want this to ferment at 80 to 90 degrees. I'm not gonna spend that kind of money to heat my house to 80 or 90 degrees. There's no way that's happening. We can create a microclimate inside my oven. No heat on, just the light. I have a thermometer in there so I can track the temperature. We want between 80 and 90 degrees. I'm gonna go ahead and pause this. I will be back tomorrow and we'll give this a stir so you can see how things are progressing. See you then. Hi, this is a still photo of day 2 of the sourdough starter. Honestly, it was a long week and I was tired and I didn't feel like cleaning up my kitchen. So rather than take video, I actually just took still life pictures. This is day 2 before and after I stirred it. Now this is day 3. Again, it was still a long week and I was really tired. So the first part is the picture without being stirred. And then the lighter colored is when it has been stirred. The oil had separated and come to the top. That was why it looked so different. And then I stirred it in and it looked lighter colored. Welcome to day 4. I have my crock pot out of the oven. It's been in there with the light on in the oven. This is, say, 4 days now. It smells yeasty. I'm gonna raise this up and tip it down so you can see what I'm gonna be looking at. We have one more task to complete. So I'm gonna take the lid off. As you can see, there's a liquid on the top. You see that? It does tend to separate at times. So I'm gonna be adding ingredients to this in order to make the waffles tomorrow. This is something you're gonna do anytime you wanna use your sourdough starter. You wanna activate it the night before. This is where my mom's recipe varies from my Dorothy Dean recipe. The Dorothy Dean just uses warm water and flour to the starter at this point. My mom's recipe uses flour, sugar, and buttermilk. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the flour. And you do want to use a stainless steel spoon. So that's 2 cups of flour, 2 cups of buttermilk, and 4 tablespoons of sugar. And then we're gonna give this another stir. It definitely smells yeasty. Sourdough starter has been a bit of a project. It's not a lot of work each day, but it definitely requires daily attention. That's why I like this recipe, because it only takes 3 or 4 days, where the other recipe I used before could take 3 or 4 weeks to fully develop. Okay, see, look how nice and thick that is. And this is gonna grow overnight again. So I'm gonna put the lid back on. I'm gonna keep it as constant temperature as much as possible. This is gonna go back in the oven, and tomorrow we'll actually use it and to make into the waffles. The light has been on the oven for 4 days now. The temperature is pretty constant in there. It's right about 85 degrees, and you want between 80 and 90, so that's ideal. Creating the microclimate, and then this is gonna go back in there, and we will be back tomorrow and finish this up. So we'll see you tomorrow. All right, so I'm gonna show you the completed sourdough. Okay, so I'm gonna tip that forward so you can see a little bit. So what the difference a day made, there's a lot more volume of it from yesterday, but then I did add 2 cups of flour. First thing we have to do before we do anything with our waffles is to pull out our starter for next time. So I have a nice clean canning jar here. I'm gonna use a funnel so I can get everything in there. You need at least 1 cup of your starter for next time. So that's about a cup. I'm gonna add a little bit more just to make sure I have at least a cup. And it's gonna go into my jar. Next time I wanna make something with sourdough, we start off with what I did on day 4. So I added flour, buttermilk, and sugar. Those were what I added yesterday. So when you want to use your sourdough starter again, you'll start by doing that first. Nice clean lid, nice clean ring. This will go in the refrigerator. It will stay there. And then you can use this, assuming you don't let it die, you can use it over and over again. In fact, the more you use it, the better it gets. It will develop a better flavor and a richer quality to it if you use it more often. So I'm going to set this aside for now, and we'll go ahead with the waffle ingredients. To make waffles, we've got the hard work done. This is the easy part. So I'm going to move this aside for just a bit. So we start off with 2 eggs, and that's 2 eggs, and they're going to be lightly beaten. And you do want to use stainless steel utensils if at all possible, and 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. So there's the oil, and 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. That's it. That's all that needs to go into it now. Let me give that a good stir. And get the eggs mixed in well. They are what's going to, well, they're going to give it it's going to give it flavor, but it's also going to help with the rising a bit more. Okay, so I need to stop my camera. I do have to cook these waffles over at the counter, so I have to rearrange all of my setup here. And then I'll meet you over at the counter and we'll get cooking some waffles. I'm over here at the counter. I'm going to turn the camera down so you can see the waffle iron. There we go. All right, so here's my waffle iron. This is my Belgian waffle iron. I do have 2 waffle irons. In this application, I thought the Belgian waffle would be the better choice. Put a little bit of butter in the waffle iron and then spread it around with my pastry brush. I'll make sure it gets on the top as well. I don't know if you can see how foamy that is. You can hear it kind of effervescing. The baking powder reacts with the buttermilk that I put in yesterday. Causing more foaming and more effervescence. Honestly, my kitchen kind of smells like beer right now from the yeast. Okay. Go ahead and close her down, and this should take about 5 to 6 minutes. And also, one way you can tell when the waffle's done or just about done is when the steam stops rising. Okay, well, the steam is beginning to dissipate. Okay, we're at 5 minutes. The light hasn't gone off yet. Smells good. Appears to be done. It's definitely crispy. I have my work cut out for me, so I'll be making a bunch of waffles. When I'm done, I will be back. Okay, so I'm all done. I ended up getting 7 full-size waffles out of it. The last one was kind of a little bit thinner because I was just running out of batter. I'll turn this down so you can see my results. So these are my waffles. I've got one set aside here for tasting. They do tend to get softer from sitting, obviously, so there's, moisture reabsorbing into them. So I'll set these aside, and here's my sample. Okay, we gotta put butter on that. That's obligatory, right? You gotta have butter. And syrup. This is just nothing special, just regular maple syrup. Although I do heat mine. I would never put cold syrup on a hot waffle. That's really good. It's zingy from the sourdough, but it's also zingy from the buttermilk. Definitely got some flavor to it. One more bite. Make sure I get some butter with this one. There's a little bit of butter. That's good. Okay, so just to recap, the sourdough that I put in the refrigerator earlier, if next time you want to use sourdough, you want to take that out. To that, you would add 2 cups of flour, 2 cups of buttermilk, and 4 tablespoons of sugar. It goes into a warm environment. I use the insert from my slow cooker because it retains heat nicely. goes into the oven with a light on but no heat, so it wants to be between 80 and 90 degrees, and mine's ideal. It's like right at 85 degrees. So that sits overnight, and then the next day you pull out your 1 cup or more of your starter, put that away, that's for next time, and then you add your eggs, oil, salt, baking powder, and soda, and that's when you make your food. So again, I will include the recipes for the biscuits, the pancakes, the waffles, and the bread. The bread's kind of a long one, but I'll include that anyways, so that you can use the sourdough, and the more you use it, the better it's going to get. Well, so today is my anniversary. Today's about 1 year to this week that I started recording videos. I committed to making 15 weeks worth of videos when I began. Who thought a year later I'd still be doing this, but here we are. So yay! As far as the recipes go, in the Dorothy Dean, they include the ingredients and the list of ingredients and the instructions for making the biscuits, the pancakes, the bread, and I will also include that along with the sourdough waffle recipe. The Dorothy Dean cookbook was a subscription that my mom paid for or purchased for me for several years when I first set up housekeeping. It was a service that was through our local newspaper, so the recipes that are published or printed in the newspaper from week to week were mailed out to us in monthly increments throughout the year. So I have several years worth of these recipes. They're actually, most of them are really good. The paper no longer offers the service. More than likely, the recipes that they print are probably available online, which I just honestly have never looked. Come next week, I will be making caramel nut rolls, so please come back for that. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out to me in the comments. I really do love hearing from you. Keeps it from getting lonely in here. Plus, with all this is going to be kind of, it's a good one, but it takes a little bit of getting used to how to work with it. So don't be afraid to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate that. I also want to say hi to my new subscribers. And I want to say thank you to those of you who keep watching my videos week after week. I really do appreciate you. Thank you for joining me on my journey. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.